Hi, everyone. We're going to get started. I feel like a very strange way up here on this stage because we're actually going to be sitting lower. But welcome, everyone. Good evening. My name's Fran Rosenfeld, and I'm the Director of Public Programs here at the Museum of the City of New York. Thank you so much for joining us for our conversation tonight. The wide, wild world of New York City cycling, and we're thrilled to bring together members of some of New York's most vibrant cycling clubs and subcultures in this conversation moderated by photographer and author Sam Polcer. Tonight's program is the last event in our series that we are presenting in conjunction with our exhibition on the third floor, which I hope you've had a chance to see. It's called Cycling in the City, a 200-year history. And it traces the bike's transformation of urban transportation and leisure and explores the extraordinary diversity of cycling cultures in this city, past and present. If you didn't get a chance to see the exhibition earlier today, please come back. The museum is open every day of the week, 10 to 6, and the exhibition closes October 14th. And I'm thrilled to say that one of the curators of the exhibition, Donald Albrecht, is in the audience with us tonight, and just want to acknowledge it's a beautiful exhibition. So, and I also would like to thank Bike New York for hosting the winter cycling workshop, free winter cycling workshop immediately before this panel. If you were in the bike, was anyone here in the bike winter cycling workshop? Oh, wow, excellent. So you're going to bike in the snow? No problem. So looking ahead, I hope you'll return to the museum for more programs. You'll find them listed in your printed program. And now I want to just get straight to the program tonight. So please turn off anything that buzzes or beeps. Feel free to tweet using our hashtag MCNYLive. And now I'm going to introduce our speakers. Their bios are also in your program. Starting from is it your left? Yes, your left, my right. We have Brenda Clavijo, the daughter of Julio Clavijo, president and founder of the Puerto Rican Schwinn Club. And the club, whose most established branch has been part of the Bushwick community since the 70s, brings the dynamic traditions of the Puerto Rican Schwinn Club and bikes and clubs to New York. And these are customized Schwinns customized with great care, and they light up events across the city. Brenda is a longtime supporter and member of the club. She's advocated for their history and cultural legacy for years while honoring the memory of her father. So what a thrill to have her.
Thank you.
Yeah. Next to Brenda, we have David Trimble. He's the founder and director of the Red Hook Criterium, a race in which cyclists ride on brakeless, fixed-gear bicycles. Oof. He conceived the original vision for the race in 2008, and he now oversees all aspects of the competition, which has spawned races all around the world, including London, Barcelona, and Milan. And formerly, he also raced go-karts professionally and worked as a mechanic on Indy cars. And then we turn to, so welcome, David. Turn to Tara Parsons, who's been a cycling coach for individual cyclists and teams since 2008. She now coaches women's racers and members of the Century Road Club Association. She also serves as an ambassador for Rafa, the cycling sportswear brand. She's a former bicycle racer herself. She competed for 10 years regionally and nationally at the elite level. So welcome to Tara.
Badass.
Yeah. Thank you. And we're thrilled to also welcome Tom Porter, lifelong bicycle enthusiast, artist, and builder living in Brooklyn. As a professional metal worker, Porter continued to expand his creative concepts of the bicycle by building them from scratch, creating Porter Cycles, his bicycle building brand. He's built a reputation for attention to detail, unique construction methods, and design features, and he recently won Best New Builder at the North American Hand-Built Bike Show. And he will be speaking about the Black Label Bike Club, one of the more intriguing subcultures in New York. And then last but not least, Sam Polcer, our moderator, is a photographer and a cyclist. His images have appeared in the New York Times, National Geographic, the Wall Street Journal, Esquire, Travel and Leisure, many other publications. His first book, New York Bike Style, was published in 2014. And you will see many of his amazing photographs in the exhibition, and you will probably recognize them as well from the event flyer. He also, in his words, attempts to maintain a blog, Preferred Mode, which features some of the photographs from that project. Right now, he is Associate Director of Content Strategy at the Brooklyn Academy of Music. He's previously been editor at Hemispheres and Director of Communications at Bike New York. So this is a really exciting group, and won't you please join me in giving them a warm welcome.
All right. We have some pictures to show. Probably should have shown them while we were introducing everyone, so we'll do that again. All right, so we talked about, is this? All right. Oh, me first. Younger folks might recognize the guy on the left. That's Casey Neistat. He wrote the foreword to New York Bike Style. I like that image just because it's probably the goofiest one in the book. It was his idea to throw his bike up in the middle of Broadway during rush hour and have me take his picture. We did not sign any release, any forms for that. Anyway, I'll go through some of these photos. I think generally the idea is just to show that while we have 4 people here that represent various subcultures here in New York City, that there's an infinite number of subcultures here in New York City related to bikes. When I was doing some talks for the book, I'd get questions like, so what's the cycling scene like in New York? And to me, that's like asking, like, what's the scene like in New York? It's just, there are people who ride bikes and they come from all over, so. I do think that we have 4 very good representatives here that we can have a good conversation about that. So yeah, the idea behind the book was to show the diversity and the love for bikes and to show how good it can look because it obviously feels very good to ride a bike. I wanted to show how good it could look as well. This one, when you're working on a book about cycling in New York and you see this guy riding down the street with his bike, you do pull a U-turn and, almost get hit by a car to go take his picture. A couple more. If anyone here is, if I show you on screen, can you raise your hand? Because I don't actually know who's here. This was done the first year City Bike came out, so we did include City Bike in there. The one on the left, I like telling people about this. I think I've never gotten so tired chasing someone to take a picture. She was going up the Williamsburg Bridge. The Bmx Scene, I just want to point that out. We don't have anyone here representing the Bmx Scene, but it's thriving and as intriguing as any other. Up in the Bronx, there's the Mullaly Bike Park, which is basically like a user-run bike park. They maintain it themselves and have events where they'll nail boards together and create this skate park for BMX dudes to hang out. On the left, we have Tom over here riding a mutant bike. Bridget on the. Oh, okay. All right, so that's me. Did some bike portraits, got to know a lot of different people in the bike scene, and became sort of connected to all of these various communities, to the point where I've taken portraits of 2 of the people here on stage. All right, so Tara, let's talk about you. So we know you're a racer. You are a brand ambassador for Rafa. You're a cycling coach. I like to ask people. Let's start in the beginning. I'm gonna ask everyone this question. So get ready. I like hearing a cycling origin story. I feel like everyone kind of has this moment when they realize that they love bikes, and whether it's love riding bikes in New York City or just bikes in general. do you have a moment that you can describe to me about when that happened for you? And then if you want to take it past there, how it led to where you are now.
Absolutely. So I moved to New York like any great college graduate with this idea of fame and fortune or whatever. Or actually, I was going to only be here for 6 months, and then I was moving on and getting on with my career.
Sorry, I just pulled that up because I know it was the first one. Sorry.
You could just leave that going.
I'm going to leave it.
And of course, like the job I moved here for fell through. And so I was kind of already into bikes, but I dove directly into becoming a bike messenger. And that's really what made me fall in love with riding and riding my bike in New York. And I was actually particularly inspired. You probably know this guy. I don't know. I think he's kind of famous in New York. There's this guy, Dexter, who's a one-legged messenger. And so I worked at the same company as Dexter, and I mean, chasing him down the avenues was incredible. And so that's where I really learned to love riding fast. And then from there, you know, people started talking about like, oh, hey, you know, there's this thing called bike racing, you know, you should give it a try. And I was like, what? People race these things? And they were like, yeah, come out to, you know, Prospect Park or Central Park on the weekends at like, you know, 6 in the morning. And so I did, you know, and got up before dawn, showed up, and then, you know, I mean, the first race I attended, I didn't do. I just went to check it out. And that swoosh of the riders and the wind that you feel when they're passing was so tantalizing. And so that's what really sold me on the whole thing. And I dove in deep and started racing basically the next weekend, and did that pretty seriously for about 10 years. Took some time off, then somehow got dragged into coaching people, and then it just blossomed into like this passion for getting people, especially women, into riding bikes.
All right, I'm gonna go through your photos and maybe if there's anything you want to say about any of
Sure.
them. I'll go through them kind of quickly. Who are we looking at here?
So the previous one and this one is from just this past Saturday, and this was for the Rafa Women's 100, which is this global women's cycling event, and it challenges women to ride 100 kilometers. And so this was the New York ride, and this was not even quite the whole group, but this is up in Nyack, which was our turnaround point. And that previous boomerang was of the ride leaders who were, you know, cheesing it up here in Nyack as well. So a lot of that is just, you know, this is, you know, what I do is just try and work with people on bikes and get them into riding, and mostly women. I mean, I don't exclude the dudes, but, you know. And this is my dog, Jessie, over here, who loves bikes, too. And we do a little bit of cyclocross racing, which is super fun, and my dog loves that, too. Like, bikes and dogs are like this beautiful marriage made in heaven, in my opinion.
Does everyone here know what? Does anyone know what cyclocross? Does everyone here know what cyclocross is? It's kind of fascinating, and this is probably the only opportunity we're gonna have to talk about it. This middle picture here, can sum up cyclocross in one sentence.
It's the most fun you'll ever have on a bike. I don't know. You're riding a modified road bike that can have some knobby tires, and you're riding it over mixed terrain in any conditions. Mud is usually involved. Snow isn't always, but it's a fall sport. It starts in September. You can have 80-degree races now, and it goes through January. And so, you know, I've also done cyclocross races in 8-degree weather. It can be really insane. And this particular race is in Queens. So,
Very cool.
yeah.
All right, Brenda. We're gonna go through some pictures. Obviously, you are the daughter of the founder of the Puerto Rican Schwinn Club.
Yes, I am.
Which is fascinating. Actually, before you start, can you show everyone that jacket? Because I think it says a lot about.
he created it himself. He thought about it, and he wanted to have something when they rode out to represent them. And so this is how the vest that you see right now, all the clubs wearing. One way or the other, they have a vest or a shirt. And I'm also wearing the first shirt they created to run in the Fifth Avenue Puerto Rican parades, which has their name in the back.
So can you tell me how the Puerto Rico Schwinn Club started?
Well, I guess it was just, oh, you have the same bike, or everybody was riding around, and I guess, old people riding Pee Wee Herman bikes. That's how they said it. So everybody started meeting up and riding to the Lower East Side, and like I said, one thing led to another. Like, my mom and dad would leave for the weekends, and like, what are they doing? They're riding bikes. They hanging out, and they get to wear their colors, they get to wear their flag, and everybody's having fun and just riding. That's my dad. That's when he got inducted into the Harlem Museum, and he left one of his pins behind. And it was my honor to do this with him. This was the first Puerto Rican parade in Bushwick. And again, another honor to run when he couldn't. And I have his shirt with his, his image on. My bike, my sexy bitch. That's my boo. That's the one that takes me. Me and him, we created this. And so I will never change it. That's my baby. And this was us honor him when he passed away. And yeah, some of his peoples.
So
He created something big that now is carried on through other clubs. And I love it. I just love to see the colors. I love to see everybody out enjoying their bikes, enjoying the crowd, and just making a good time out of just a bike. That's it.
So you were telling me backstage that it started here, and it became so sort of fun and successful here that folks in Puerto Rico started doing it kind of as a result, and then now it's become kind of
Everywhere.
it's everywhere.
They actually moved out of New York. They went back to Puerto Rico, like many Puerto Rican parents talk about. Yeah, we're gonna leave. We're gonna go move back. They did that, and they proceeded to help other clubs establish. And Schwinn clubs in Puerto Rico are huge. It's a way of living, a way of getting around, especially after the hurricane. There was no way to get around in a car. So bicycles was the way. And again, the Schwinn bike comes through. It's a great bike. Mine's is 1958. Very proud of my baby. It's a sweet ride. Thank you.
There's Brenda and her
That's
dad.
that. Bicycle fetish. I miss it so much.
Is
That
everyone
was us.
familiar with the Bicycle Fetish Day
Yeah.
in
Oh my
Williamsburg?
goodness.
It's a fun time.
Exactly.
And the Schwinn clubs roll through.
Oh my God, I miss my old man. Thank you guys. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I do want to come back. We're going to talk about the bikes themselves in a little bit, just because I want to make sure that everyone understands how that's defined. So Tom,
Hi.
you're up. All right. So Tom, you're here for a number of reasons, both as a hand-built bike maker, but also under the guise of the Black Label Bike Club, a notorious and fun bike outfit. Can you tell me, when you first started riding, what that was like for you and what drew you to that scene?
Ooh. Oh yeah.
That's the tallest of the tall. So this one in particular, before I tell the origin story, like these are two bikes. There's actually some Schwinns up top there. My friend Greg had collected these bikes, and they happened to find a matching set, and we decided to challenge ourselves
Dad loved
This was at Fetish Day too. So we set out a challenge that a friend of mine had said he wanted to see a Swingset bike, and we talked about it for years, and we finally decided that we would make it happen. So this is actually two sides of the Swingset bike that ultimately comes together to be one bike with a swing in the middle. And so that one in particular was like, that's been at Bike Fetish Day and a few other places, and like it carries 2 riders on the bottom of each bike, both tandems, 2 riders on top, and then somebody's swinging, and then there's room in between for people to just kind of hang out on top of it. So I think max capacity at some bike kill, we had probably about 15 people on the thing before it caved in. And we had to weld fork blades inside the wheels to keep them from caving in under the weight of all the riders. And we discovered that you don't actually have to pedal because the pendulum effect of somebody swinging is enough to drag it along. So it gets this sort of like... And the first time we rode it out, we put it together at my friend Johnny's place, and we were biking it to the event Bike Kill, which was in Bed-Stuy, from basically like Freedom Triangle, which is over by where Myrtle and Bushwick Ave come together. And we were going down the block, and we literally just took over the lane. And this woman was like, wanted to get on, and we were like, yeah, jump on. And she was like jumped on the swing, and we literally rode her to Bed-Stuy with her just like gleefully swinging off of this bike in the middle of traffic. And then we got there, and she jumped off and was like, cool, thanks, bye. And we were like, does anybody know who that was? And we were like, no, like no idea.
Wow.
So, sorry? No, I don't think so. You'd have to.
I have one on my Instagram from years ago. It was at the Bicycle Fetish Day, and I saw you guys doing
yeah,
the
we
swing.
circled the block like 700 times with people on Bike Fetish Day, and to the point where the whole Swingset bike was like to a tipped degree because we kept taking all the corners in the same direction.
Let's okay. There's a lot to talk about.
Stories.
I'm curious how you got started riding in New York, and if you jumped right into a street gang, or did you start riding first?
We're not a street gang.
I know, I'm kidding.
Well, the one I want to tell that to me is most important is actually from nursery school. And it was, I went into this room at nursery school after like feeling like a super awkward kid and didn't know how to socialize. And I walked into this room of kids circling this room on like 3-wheelers and like all these random like, you know, pedal bikes and kick bikes and all this stuff. And just immediately my head exploded. Seeing all these different like weird forms and like all these kids just kind of cycling around like psychopaths. And I immediately fell in love with this like chaotic swirl of people having fun and just like really laughing a ton. And it was an immediate access to something I felt like I could participate in. And so that to me was really like the beginning of my joy of cycling was then. And it turned into power wheels and like, you know, big wheels and doing like jumps over a 2x4 and piece of plywood in the driveway, getting to circle the block and like get away from the house was a big change. And then, you know, eventually when I moved I lived in Boston before I moved to New York. And for me, like going to school, going to work, like doing anything I wanted to do, the only way to do it all, given where I had to live and where I was trying to get to, was by bike. And so it developed this like notion of like I live my life by bike, and life by bike started becoming kind of a mantra. And when I moved to New York, it was no different. Like I had been building cargo trailers because in art school I would make all this stuff and then I'd want to take it home, and instead of any other way, I just started putting it on my bike or figuring out a way to put big things, you know, get them back to where I was living or whatever. Groceries, laundry, all this stuff was like kind of decentralized. Not like New York, where you could, you know, on any given neighborhood, you kind of have an encapsulated space to do that stuff. So when I moved to New York in 2008, to answer Sam's question more specifically, 2008 was the recession. I had moved to New York with a girlfriend in hopes of going to grad school, to go to art school. And I didn't get into art school the way I wanted to, and I ended up finding a job in a metal shop that had advertised like fabricators wanted compensation based on experience. And I had done a lot of welding in art school, and I was very capable, and I'd worked as a fabricator. And so I showed up, and the shop had been managed by a member of the Black Label Bicycle Club at one point, and was sort of like a family friend shop, you know, where people came through and did projects. And so that's like just literally by chance where I landed as my first job in the city. And immediately like started making friends with people who were involved with Black Label Bike Club, which by chance I had seen on the cover of like the arts section in the Boston Globe at one point. There was a photo from Bike Hill of people jousting. And I remember, I wish I had this photo, but like actually very appropriately looked a lot like that. That's actually me on the bike and some friends around me. But so I had seen this photo and I was working in Boston and I had this moment where I was like, fuck my life. Like, why am I here right now? I can't believe that there's like fire in the background. There's people like, you know, just like horrifying makeup and like just this mash of people. It looked like Mad Max on bikes. And I was like, I am in the wrong place. And I need to get to those people, and I need to be a part of that. And that was sort of my like initial. And there's me.
Has anyone been to Bike Hill here? It's a great Halloween tradition. I highly recommend it. Yeah. But watch your step because you might get hit by a bike.
The popular hashtag for Bike Hill is best day ever. So I'm not really one to take photos myself, but my friend JP Bevins is. Sorry about that.
All right, thanks. All right, David. So you founded one of the most successful bike races and bike events in the world. How did that? From your bio, basically, we know that you were a messenger and you wanted to throw a party for yourself. How did that come about? How did you get into messengering?
No, I was never a bike messenger,
No?
actually.
Oh, okay.
Kind of a long, windy road. Growing up, my father and my uncle were both bicycle builders. They made some of the first carbon fiber composite frames. They built bikes for the U.S. Olympic team, and they really did a lot of innovating in bicycle design. But growing up, I actually had no interest at all in bikes. I got really interested in motorsports, and I raced go-karts. I wanted to become the next American Formula One driver. And throughout my whole childhood, I was racing karts. And then when my dream of becoming a driver failed, I started working as a mechanic on Indy cars. So I was traveling around the world, going to these big racing events, but really nothing to do with cycling at that point. At some point, I kind of had this, because I was so used to racing go-karts all the time, and I couldn't do it anymore, I said, well, maybe I should try racing a bike. I've been around bikes as a kid. I should just do it just because I like the competition. And then I started racing mountain bikes. At the time, I was living in Texas. So I started racing bikes really just for a form of competition. And then when I moved to New York City, I kind of started falling into the subcultures. I started racing alleycats with the bike messengers, getting really involved in the urban racing scene. At the same time, I was also trying to get more involved in serious bike racing.
Can you explain to folks what an alleycat is?
So an alleycat it's kind of based off like a bike messenger's working day. You get a list of checkpoints around the city. You can go any way you want through traffic. They're really crazy and super dangerous, not very well organized, but super fun and have great atmosphere and very creative. And then at the same time, I wanted to be involved in more kind of serious competition, so I was racing in Prospect Park and Central Park. And those events were great because the strongest rider did well, and they had good timing and scoring and were well organized, but they didn't have very much character. And then they were boring events. No one cared who won. There was no creativity to them. And then, at one point for my birthday party in 2008, I kind of decided to combine the two worlds, like the urban cycling world and the more serious cycling world.
And then it became a global phenomenon.
Oh yeah, so I think I put some photos of the early days in here, but this is one of the later years, 2016. So it got to the point where we had 15,000 spectators. We had athletes from 60 different countries competing. We had all the global media was following the race. But really, the kind of the spirit of the event was the same as when I started it in 2008, which had no permits. Yeah, here. So this is from one of the early days. We had no permission. We were just doing it late at night through the streets of Red Hook. You can see there was, yeah, on the left. Yeah, we didn't even close the streets. It was on a bus route, so we just kind of had to race around them. The format is it's basically a 1 kilometer, very technical course with a lot of corners. It's about 45 minutes long, and the first rider across the line wins. And the format from the very beginning, when we were doing it on the streets without permission, to what it became in modern times, stayed the same. It went from like a urban cycling event underground to like a almost professional sporting event.
All right. Thank you. And just to clarify for the Red Hook Crit, I don't know if you mentioned this, I may have missed this, but it's all fixed gear bikes. So they're no brakeless. Basically a brakeless bike. You need to control your speed with your feet.
So that's the fixed gear bikes are very common in the alleycats, and no one before the Red Hook Crit would have thought to. They're actually designed. They're designed for the velodrome, which is a banked track, and you don't need brakes. And no one would have thought to actually ride one off of a velodrome on the street, except for bike messengers. And because I was racing against bike messengers, I knew how maneuverable and how fast they could be ridden. And so applied them to this.
And so you had mentioned, and I'm going to open this up to everybody, but you had mentioned that one of the reasons you started this was because you found that some of the races weren't creative enough for you. But I've also found that within the bike world in general, for whatever reason, and I'm kind of curious as to what that reason is, wherever bikes are, creativity is not far behind. Obviously, we see the amazing fashion here on the end, and the jacket, and the creativity that went into these mutant bikes, and Rafa has this very well-established brand and style. And there's a lot of creative aspect to it. I know I mentioned this in our pre-meeting, where we'd often refer to a certain style of photography that Rafa uses as like a lot of lens flare and like very high-end premium imagery. And Red Hook Crit has such a amazing brand, and every time you go there, you see so many photographers and filmmakers and all that. I interviewed David Byrne for my book, and he would tell me that while he's riding, he keeps a tape recorder in his pocket, and he'll write his lyrics that way sometimes. And so I'm just kind of interested in that. Maybe I'll start here immediately to my right. Why do you think that is, or what role does creativity play within sort of your bike subculture?
Well, the bike is a child of human creativity, right? So that's for starters. And I think that people who engage with the world around them as directly as a cyclist does are by nature creative and entangled in discovery, right? So that is sort of, to me, endemic. That's fabric for cycling community. How that expresses itself is so widely varied. That's kind of what's so exciting about bikes, is that yes, there is a certain gate of entry where it's having money enough to buy one of these machines, or having the wherewithal to figure out how to do it yourself to make one. But it's sort of way easier access and doesn't require a regular upkeep of money the way driving does. And so as cyclists, I don't know, I think that there's something really magical about the nature of not having seatbelts, not being surrounded by a metal bubble, and really being exposed to your world. And I think creative people need that. I think we need the stimulus and interaction with what's going on around us and the people that are around us. And to me, that's a pretty amazing thing about bikes in general. I think my own culture that I feel connected to is DIY, do-it-yourself culture. And I think that means, for me at one point, I didn't have access or money, so I would find somebody had thrown out a bike, and I would take it and I would clean it up, and I'd find another thrown out bike that had nicer stuff on it. So I would learn how to take the stuff out of that one and put it on this other bike that fit me better or something. And through my continuous engagement with this kind of process, I got to the point where I would cut up bikes and weld them together a different way because I needed it to be a cargo bike or something else. And then it became a fun trick of being like, well, I'm going to make something really challenging and then ask my friends to try to ride it and see how that goes. And that's where something like Bike Kill comes from. And that came to the point where, you know, I wanted to go another level further. And so now I make bikes from scratch. Like, I buy tubing and I make the lugs and I make the bits and pieces, and I want them to perform a certain way. But I think really most importantly is like what I started with, which is I think that people who ride bikes are sensitive, exposed nerves, and like we enjoy that and we need that. And like, I think there's a different level of engaging with the people around you. You know, it's more like being in a relationship than when you're in a car where it's really just about you and your radio or like you and your thoughts. Whereas I think cyclists are much more like entangled with each other and what's going on around us.
Well spoken. Brenda, we showed off the jacket earlier, but obviously there's a strong sort of fashion element to the Schwinn clubs, and also I just want to clarify: the Puerto Rico Schwinn Club started, and now there are other clubs that do, you know, kind of you roll in the same
Many clubs.
circles, but it's kind of like,
And
you
many
know,
clubs. You have Connecticut, you have the Bronx, you have New Jersey, you have, and Brooklyn has many. So everybody creates their own bike. I mean, you want to make it as flashy as you want, as loud as you want. My bike, I have a car horn, so I pump it, and people move out the way, so it serves its purpose. So like I said, it's just the freedom. That's what you was trying to say. The freedom of getting on your bike, don't have to put on your seatbelt, just go. And if you could ride and you know how your way around, so you take your bike wherever you want to take it. And you park it wherever you want. And you treat it however you want to treat it, but as you treat your bike treats you back. So you take it and she takes you. It's just a freedom, and I just, like I said, it's just flashy. It makes me feel happy when I'm on my bike.
Yeah, you know, I want to follow up on this feeling of freedom and creativity, and how just being on a bike and riding your bike just can put you in this frame of mind where that's so hard to be in that frame of mind in other places because we're so bombarded, especially in these days, by everything. And when you're out on your bike, especially when you're riding by yourself,
it's awesome.
You know, that flow of just creativity, imagination, I mean, I think that's one of the things that really drives this idea of creativity around bikes is because you get out and you ride and you feel that sense of freedom, and it just gives you that space to think.
It does.
so
Exactly.
whereas Brenda's crew tends to ride a little bit slower down the street because when you're riding a crew, they're basically cruisers from the 40s, 50s, and 60s, right? On the flip side, we have two folks here for whom competition plays a large role in defining their culture. David, I'm curious. So you started this because you were interested in racing and you know, competing with other folks. To what degree does that play a role in defining Red Hook Crit and the way that you enjoy bikes?
Yeah, also touching on the creativity part, we really use creativity to promote our cycling event to people who aren't cyclists, because we want to make it really spectacular, and we want to bring people in who might not care about the sport of bike racing, because that's very niche. So we would use, you know, graphic design and photography and video, and having artists make paintings around the race. We would use creativity to promote the sporting aspect, the competition aspect. And in New York City, there's so many talented artists and photographers, and everyone's, you know, famous architects. And if you want to like attract people to your event, if you want, you know, 15,000 people to come watch bikes go around in circles, you have to be very creative. And for us, that was really where the creativity came out. And Yeah, the competition's exciting, but if you have competition without creativity, you end up with like the club races in the park, which are fun to compete in yourself, but they're not necessarily events that you want to go and watch, or you're not going to make a big community event or something very spectacular out of it.
Are you saying that people don't want to get up at 4 a.m. to go to an empty Central Park and race around it for an hour and a half? I don't know what you're talking about.
That sounds exciting. That sounds exciting.
All right,
Yes.
I'm gonna attempt to make this to peg it to current news. This conversation. So obviously, infrastructure and city policies and attitudes of non-cyclists towards cycling, has obviously caused a bit of friction. And I'm wondering to what extent all of that has helped define where you all sit within your cultures. Obviously, we're talking about subcultures. This isn't mainstream. So, alleycat racing or having to wake up at 4 a.m. to have your race. So let's start with that. Let's start with you, Tara. So how does your community sort of feel about the direction that things are going in the city?
I think it's really challenging. I think right now it's more challenging than it ever has been. I think even though our races start at 5:30 or 6 in the morning, there's so many pressures against us having these events. One of the things that's happening a lot with road racing in general, is that there's actually an evolution of different types of events, and people are actually trying to be more creative about what is out there to enjoy on two wheels. For example, there's been a huge rise of these gravel races and just riding on dirt roads. So there's a lot more of this, like leaving the city and leaving the pavement, and maybe even actually on your road bike, not necessarily even getting a different bike, but taking it out on dirt roads and trying to get away from some of the traffic. I think everybody here probably feels that pressure from angry motorists and everything else. I'm out in New Jersey every weekend.
What about you, Tom? How do you and your crew sort of feel about navigating the current state of affairs?
I was hoping this would come up because it's really disheartening. It's really, really disheartening. I've lost multiple friends in the last couple of years, and sorry, I'm like, I was saying earlier, like we're out with like no seatbelts. We're like, these exposed creatures on a metal contraption that flings us into the air by our own human power, right? That's what cycling actually is. And for whatever reason you're out doing it, you're somebody who's trying to get to work, you're somebody who's going to visit family. It's like you're living a life, right? Like this is just a mode of transportation. And as Sam called it, it's a preferred mode. And honestly, like the idea that somebody's life matters more or less because of the mode of transportation you're engaged in is heartbreaking. And the fact that we have a system that supports people in cars and doesn't support people who are on bicycles is fucking heartbreaking. And the fact that like you can run somebody down in a car in this city and it's actually a legalized mechanism for murder, that the Times has written articles about stating exactly that fact, and that this police system doesn't support people who aren't in cars. The government can't seem to get a handle on the idea that this is literally legalized murder is heartbreaking. And that's how people, to the tune of 22, I think, already this year, which is twice already this year what it would have been last year for cyclist fatalities. And that doesn't even include pedestrians, which is a whole nother thing, but we're here talking about cycling. It's devastating to the people that I know, and to like see a friend on life support before they pull the plug and harvest his organs to give to other people to have better lives is heartbreaking. This is a really serious issue, and like I want to feel safe, I want to feel heard, and I want to feel seen. I moved from a very angry city where there was a total disregard for cyclists in Boston, and when I moved to New York, and this is a point I really want to make, there was a flow that was epically beautiful to witness and to be a part of in the city, where everybody, there was obstacles all over the place. And I'm not a messenger. I haven't worked as a cyclist, but I've ridden my bike all over the place for my own life needs. And if there was something happening on the left, everybody would just hug to the right and flow back in. And somebody would be like, oh, boy, I know. But they would want you to get where you're going. And I would want you to get where you're going. And that's what New York was when I moved here, and I feel like it has deteriorated to an absolutely abysmal level at this point, where the car traffic, car culture has taken over. There's a thing on the exhibition upstairs that said the car and bike war is over and the bikes won. I don't believe this. That is not true. The system of asphalt roads was built for cycling, and when the car was brought in, that took over the entire structure to become what is now a highway system, which is car culture, separation of people from their environment, absolute degradation of the planet, and that's big business for you, right? Sorry, I could literally keep going forever. I'm sorry.
I'm sure we all could.
Be safe out there, please.
All that said, we are all, I'm assuming most of us here are cyclists, and definitely everyone here on the stage is a cyclist, and you're a cyclist whose life and culture has been defined in large part by New York City. New York City is and remains a wonderful place to ride a bike. I mean, I'm editorializing, but I think that's true. I think in most of our cases here, what you do and the culture that you're a part of couldn't exist anywhere else. So what makes New York such a great place to be in love with bikes? And if you could you describe briefly your perfect day on a bike? Where are you going? What are you doing? Brenda, let's start with you.
Easy access. You come and go. Perfect day. Gather up the people. I don't think we're wearing enough flags, whatever the case may be. Everybody shining their bikes. We, map out the day. Okay, we're going to Orchard Beach. We're going to Coney Island. Going to the Bronx, Lower East Side. And there's no way to get there but however you choose to get there. And the perfect way is just going and riding and enjoying your way. And it's, like I said, the freedom of just going your way. That's how I see when we gather up together and we see all the swings, everybody's shining, everybody riding, everybody's happy, and we just riding, everybody's looking, everybody loves it. When they see us in the neighborhood, everybody's just honking their horns, and it's awesome. That's a perfect day, a perfect day.
Great. David, what about you?
I think the perfect day is going to an event like Bike Kill or the Red Hook Crit or one of these really special events that had started in New York and grown and evolved, and you can see some amazing things in this city. For me, riding through the city, I couldn't live in New York City if I didn't ride my bike everywhere. I haven't ridden the subway in I think 3 years now. The only way I get around is by bike, and compared to other cities, at least in the U.S., I think it's a crazy city to ride through, but it's still a lot more cycling friendly than most places. It's competition for every inch on the road, but it still is a great place. I rode here from Red Hook, Brooklyn, and took me 30 minutes to get here tonight. And if I'd been on public transportation, it would have been more than an hour. So,
Tara?
So one of the things I think that's just amazing about New York, and for especially cyclists who want to race bikes, is that you can race your bike 4 or 5 times a week here in New York. You can race your bike on Saturday morning in Central Park, Sunday morning in Prospect Park. You can go on Tuesday night out to Floyd Bennett Field and race your bike out in Brooklyn. Sometimes they're on Thursdays as well out there, but also you can ride up over the bridge and go up to Rockley and race your bike on Thursdays. You can ride your bike out to Queens and race on the track on Wednesday nights. So, there's so much of this local racing culture here that it just doesn't exist in any other city, at least in the US. I mean, I have had friends who have started racing here. They've fell for it hook, line, and sinker. They've had to move away for work or whatever. And, they moved to beautiful places like California, which, everybody's like jealous about them riding their bikes there. And they get there and they stop racing their bikes because there aren't any bike races around. Or if there are, they're like 4 hours driving. So here in New York, you can ride your bike to 5 different races during a week, which you just can't do that anywhere else. You don't even have to get into a car. So it's awesome.
Tom?
Bike kill.
It's coming up.
Honestly, I agree 100%. That like what's really special is going to a community event, and that could have been Bike Fetish Day, that could be Red Hook Crit, that could be Bike Kill, that could be like a parade of, and I just think that like honestly like seeing this community like rallying. Critical mass, like any of these things where you see a group of cyclists being like, this is us, like this is what we do, and the fact that like we are all inclined to like come together over this really ridiculous invention, the bicycle, is really amazing. And getting to see the variety of people that show up to stuff, the variety of things you can get into, whether it's competitive or just for fun or whatever, like this is a really bold and beautiful community that we're a part of, and like I think seeing any event that celebrates that is to me like just it's such a pleasure to be a part of that. That's to me like what I would say.
Great. All right, so obviously there's endless topics we could cover over here, but I want to make sure that everyone in the audience, if you have a question for this very interesting group of people, there's a mic going around, so if you have any questions, raise your hand and we'll bring it to you.
Hi, Brenda. Hi, everybody. Brenda, I have a question. What is the most difficult challenge in creating your group and maintaining the club? No?
What's the biggest challenge in maintaining the club?
Oh. Keeping them busy. Keeping them busy. It's just event after event after event. It's just making sure that your bike is seen, making sure you're seen, and participating as much as possible, especially in the neighborhood. There's a lot of parades, there's a lot of little things here and there. People like to see the old bikes. So it's hard to get everybody together sometimes, especially everybody working. Everybody has different schedules. So that's been the challenge this year. I've been working, like, this is like the first, other than the Puerto Rican parade in Bushwick, that I've been out, talk about my bike or anything about my bike, because everybody's busy. This year's been very hard.
David, I'm sure you could agree. Having time to do what you do and organizing these events around the world has been challenging. Would you agree with that, or has it been smooth sailing the entire time?
Very challenging, yeah. From my perspective, the hardest thing to putting on events now is actually money, because the events cost a lot to produce, and as your event gets bigger, it costs more to put on as it becomes more popular. And you want to maintain the spirit of your event without it becoming too corporate, which is, very, very hard as an event organizer.
Do we have other questions?
Thanks. This was great. I wanted to just address the creativity piece and then ask a sort of double-folded question. I appreciated talking about the creativity because I have composed a song that I won't sing for everybody now because I'm not a very good singer, but it's called Asshole in the Escalade. I'm sure you can relate. And so my question, two-part question, helmet or no helmet, red light or no red light?
Definitely wear a helmet, I would say, one that fits well, and I would never stop at a red light.
No helmet. And what red light? I wasn't there.
Definitely helmet. And generally rolling. Rolling.
Absolutely helmet. It's the difference between brain dead and still here in a lot of cases. And I have learned to do pretty much what these guys are saying, except I like to really look both ways like 3 times and just keep going. But I have learned that there is a gift in pause, and that sometimes it's nice to just have a reason to slow down and take in the city. So that's, and also I don't want to get tickets from cops, and they're brutal and they hate us. So there's that.
Oh, God. Oh, yeah.
Escalating ticket prices. You know how it goes. I could buy another bike for that.
True that.
Next, right here. There's 2 right here.
I'm going to say something which may be controversial to some, but I'd like to present it as something to think about. You know, when we talk about the war on cars, when we talk about the tremendous hostility, one of the first things that comes out of drivers' mouths is they don't stop at lights, okay? And so while I would like to see something like the Iowa law, the Iowa stop, instituted, I think that the fact that we can now go through when there's the lead pedestrian interval light is a step forward. Maybe that will help us get to the others. I, on principle, I stop at lights for two reasons. I mean, aside from life preservation. One, because I think it looks good, and hopefully those idiots in their cars, and I do drive too, but hopefully they're going to say, oh, well, there is some bike riders do stop. And also, if, you know, worst case scenario, you misgauge or somebody is like really gunning it and they come around the corner, you have not got a legal leg to stand on. Whatever legal rights we do have, as small as they are, you lose that immediately.
Can I answer this, please?
Go for it.
Literally, the fact that you occupy space and time is a problem to a car driver. And it is until you cease to exist in time and space that you will not hear something negative from them. And I honestly believe this. And I think that if you adhere to every single rule, to the letter of the law, you will still get run over, because it has nothing to do with crossing a red light. It has to do with completely flagrant abuse of space and time on the hand of somebody in something that is capable of destroying another human. Whereas if I run into somebody, they might fall down, they might get bruised, whatever. They will not get crushed and smushed across the road. And there's a level of separation from the human condition because of the metal bubble of the car that allows for that. And anger, I'm a cyclist. You put me behind the wheel and I'm like, God damn. I literally think it's a product of car culture. I don't think it has anything to do with what I consider a responsible level of, even if you are running lights, you're probably not getting run over because of that. I agree with you, but at the same time, like, I just think it's a product of mixing the two.
So does everyone here advocate for protected lanes?
Yes.
No.
No.
I just want to add, as far as the running of the red lights, I mean, I absolutely believe in pedestrian safety, and I will stop for pedestrians. I will make sure if I am rolling behind where they are walking. I think it's just the right thing to do and the courteous thing to do. It drives me mad in the parks when cyclists ride their bikes in the runner's lane. I just feel like, you know what? If I'm in a bike lane, I don't want a car there, and bikes have no business being in that walking or running lane either. So I'm definitely very pedestrian sensitive. Not so car sensitive.
I think we had a question.
I think you've all been speaking wonderfully of cycling, but you left out the true beauty of when you see a pack of riders going down the street, or one person riding very well with good form and technique. There's a beauty in that part of cycling as well.
I agree. Actually, I wanted to mention, it sort of touches on something I wanted to ask about the connection that our various cultures have to the bikes themselves. And I feel like well, you could all speak to it, I think, but the two of you that do sort of more racing and probably are more familiar with what a bike fitter is, or with single speeds being connected to that bike. I think he raises a good point that there is a beauty in athleticism and in connection to the machine itself.
Yeah, I think that really is on display at the Red Hook Crit. You have extremely elite athletes who are super fit on beautiful bicycles riding in a pack, and the strongest rider is at the front at the end. And you'll see before we start our race, there's 50 photographers on the line trying to capture that and trying to capture the beauty of an elite cyclist on a highly tuned racing bicycle.
Any other questions? We have two over there, one over here.
Hi, actually, I just wanted to say I'm actually legally blind. I've never driven a car. I proudly say that I have the least carbon footprint amongst all my friends because I've never put gas in a vehicle. I'm legally blind. But I do notice there was a question about red lights, and I do observe. I walk a lot. I walk everywhere, and at night times, sometimes it's I have to look left and right, maybe several times to make sure that there's no bike coming my way, even in the bike lane. So I'm extra cautious, and sometimes they're not even bike lights or people wearing lights on the helmet. So I have noticed the other day I was walking, and within a span of 1 minute, I noticed 4 bicyclists just going and whizzing past the red light, and so it does. It basically. I think everybody in this room should be mindful of pedestrians, because there could be all sorts of pedestrians on the road. I love bikes myself. I've ridden bikes. When I was in college in Tucson, I would bike my way to class every day. There were bike lanes around campus, and there was even an annual bike event, Cyclovia, which used to take place every year. So I love bikes, and I hope that everybody is more mindful of all sorts of pedestrians who are passing by on the road. That's just my 2 cents. I just wanted to say that to everyone.
Hi. Regarding the Red Hook Criteriums, professional bike racing right now is dominated by teams. It's not the strongest guy at the front necessarily, but it's the strongest team who got their fastest sprinter to the front. Is the Red Hook Criterium the same way?
The Red Hook Crit there is teams that compete in it, but because they're on fixed gear bikes with no brakes, it's very technical. It's very difficult to ride your bike at the front of the race. So the teams aren't able to control the race as much as in professional road cycling. And that makes the race more fun to watch, because it's more, I would say it's more even for the individual rider, as opposed to one really big budget team coming and dominating easily.
Got a few over here.
So I really love the presentation, and I hope to see the exhibit at some point. So I have 2 questions. It's any one of you guys could answer. So the first question is, do you think the increasing surge of cyclists on the road have the auto industry and the auto lobbyists scared in their seat? And the second question is that, do you think we as New Yorkers, very pedestrian pro-cyclist place, can achieve a movement very similar to what happened back in the 60s and the 70s in the Netherlands, where they fought very hard against the auto lobby and were able to radically change their whole infrastructure to be pro-pedestrian, pro-cyclist.
Does anyone know that there was a name for that campaign in the Netherlands in the 60s and 70s? It had to do with there were some kids that.
It was actually later than that. It was like 70s and 80s, but it was called Kindermoord. And what happened was kind of similar to here, but apparently a significant number of children had been hit and killed, and children were out protesting and holding signs saying, "Stop killing us." Kind of like, and we had a very small group that gathered in Brooklyn recently after 10-year-old boy was killed while standing on the sidewalk waiting for a bus, and we titled it Brooklyn Weeps.
Right. So it didn't take long for the Netherlands to see something awful happen and then do something about it.
Yeah.
Seems
So
to be
funny
taking us a
enough,
little
when
while.
I spend some time in Amsterdam every now and then, and I actually follow all the rules there because it's set up for bikes and pedestrians, and the city is designed in a more human level, where in New York I feel like I'm just trying to kind of protect myself, and I feel like it's safer to ride a certain way that's more aggressive. But if the city was more bike and pedestrian friendly, I think I would be more inclined to follow the rules to a T. And I hope New York City becomes more in that direction.
I agree with that. I was in Copenhagen, I don't know, a few years ago, and that city is really designed for around bikes. And I stopped at every single, red light. There's the whole Copenhagen left that you make or whatever, because you don't make a left. You ride your bike over and then sit in the traffic that's going to be, then going straight. That whole thing. And but I don't really. I don't know. I'm pessimistic about
I think
that happening here.
The real challenge now, at least to me as a cyclist, is all these electronic scooters and bikes and the rental scooters that anyone can pick up. That to me is making the streets a little more hectic.
Can I say, if anybody's curious about a really good book in the City of Cycling, is one that I read about a New Yorker who moves his family to Amsterdam, and it's an amazingly historical book in terms of his perspective, just saying. And to the lady's point, I hate to say that I am not super positive minded about how that's going to go, and I think just as an example alone, if you look at mass shootings and what that means for our gun lobby, I'm sorry.
The exact same
we
thing.
are not close to getting to finer points that are closer to us right now in terms of pedestrian safety and the points you brought up, if we can't address that.
Right. It doesn't matter how many children have been killed here in the U.S.
And I'll just answer the first part. I don't think the car lobby is that scared currently. I think we have we have time for one more question. So let's make it a good one.
Well, kind of along the same lines as what we were talking about, do you think that there's promise for the future as far as New York becoming more cyclist friendly as the cycling community grows and more people are riding in the various different ways with the mutant bikes and road bikes and BMX and the beautiful cruisers? As the awareness, as the population of cyclists grow, do you think that just the presence of that many more cyclists will change the environment?
I personally think that as the city grows, it's going to become more dense, and it's going to make a lot more sense for more people to ride bikes, and that just naturally is going to make it more cyclists on the road. I don't know if the city will actually do things to make it better for the cyclists, but I think, general awareness. Yeah, generally, I think, the more people are going to be riding bikes as the city gets more dense, just because it's the obvious, it's an obviously good way to get around the city.
All right.
Can I quickly say something to that? I totally agree that actually the density is on the rise, and you see a lot more electric bikes, you see a lot more, as we were saying, scooters and all variety of means of transportation. And I think that, unfortunately, I think there's a lot of really lazy people that just need to get around. And I would love to believe that there's going to be a higher actual ridership, and I think it's mostly city bike and certain things that make it look like that's happening. But I actually think there's a diminished ridership in the city going on due to these other forms of transportation making it possible to be lazier and not have to do the work of riding a bicycle. So I am hopeful, I'm enthusiastic. I will help put anybody on a bike who wants help with that. And I encourage bike culture, but I do unfortunately see, I don't know, I worry, and I hope that more people choose conscientious transportation over individual lazy versions of moving around, I guess. Sorry, I'm being a little jaded right now.
It's all right. It's hard not to. All right. Well, I just want to thank all of our panelists for being here, taking the time out of their schedules to. And those of you who rode here, ride safely.
Sam Polcer.